Stop it, Stuart. Stop it now. Hello, and welcome to the Whisky Trials, where I'm going to do a Whisky Talk. And this Whisky Talk is going to be on wetting corks. Now, a little bit of a contentious subject again, because I've had it in my notes for a while. I've been wanting to do this video for a good little bit. But what reminded me about it was a post on, I think, Scotch Addict, where somebody said, should you wet corks? And there's a bunch of people going, oh no, why are you doing it? And other people saying, yes, I do it on a regular basis kind of thing. So it got me thinking. Obviously there's people that do it and people that don't. The first time I saw it done was Stuart at Whiskey Whims. He did a video on it. And that was the first time I'd ever seen anybody wetting corks. I didn't know it existed until then. So then I started doing a bit of research, and I've kept my ear to the ground on whether people do it or don't do it. As far as I know, Stuart's the only person I've met with a whiskey collection that does it. So what is it exactly? What is it? Well, wetting corks is just simply doing that and putting a little bit of the whiskey on the cork. The reason that might be done, it could be, I think, maybe derived from a wine storage thing, because obviously wine is stored for the most part like that, so that there's constant contact between the wine and the cork, and that's for a good reason, in terms of, like, it's a lower ABV, and it seems to keep the cork in a better state of repair, keeping it moist, and so it doesn't degrade, get dry and brittle and break up. However, wine's very different from whiskey, isn't it? It's, you're looking at, sort of 10 to 14% ABV versus 40 to like 65. So I think that's obviously where it's come from, where people are like, yeah, you've got to wet the corks a little bit, keep them lubricated. That brings me on to, why is it done? Why is it done is obviously to stop this degradation. Probably comes from the wine, like I said. But does it actually work? Does wetting the cork keep it lubricated, keep it in a less dry state, and stops that crumbling, degrading that some of us may have seen? I've definitely seen it on a couple of the bottles I've bought from auction, older ones. So that brings me on to, should it be done? Should you wet your corks? Now, well, according to Stuart at Whiskey Whims, you should. He does it. He's not had any problems doing it. While I was doing some research, I came across a pretty good article on it, though, from Drink Hacker on drinkhacker.com. Now, this guy's been writing about the same subject, and he put the question out to a few of the kind of experts in the industry. So he said one of the best responses he's got was from Ewan Morgan, a program director for Diageo US. So obviously he goes on to talk about how wine is famously stored horizontally, blah blah blah. But the interesting bit, he says, is here. So he's talking about whiskey now. If the bottle is on its side, the higher ABV will start to degrade the cork at an exponential rate, and the structural integrity will be at risk, and you may end up with a very expensive leak. Now, so essentially, are we saying do nothing then? Is wetting the cork just adds to the degradation? So we shouldn't do that. So what should we do? Should we just leave it? But he comes up with this little bit that I've never heard of before. So for the most part, whiskey corks shouldn't really dry out, and this is why. So it's due to a volatility of the alcohol vapour inside the bottle, which is a side effect of the strength of the spirit. In effect, you've got a constant gentle circulation of moisture bathing the cork and slowing down the shrinkage. So to summarise, wine is bottled at a lower ABV and the amount of alcohol vapour inside the bottle is very small. Whiskey and other spirits with their 40% ABV and up have a headspace that is full of alcohol and water vapour, thus keeping the cork moist even though it's stored upright. So, essentially that little bit at the top, they're saying, has alcohol vapour and water vapour in it, and it's constantly in this kind of little circulating flux. And I guess it might actually happen more depending on the temperature, the ambient temperature around the bottle. So that's interesting. That's interesting because it would appear. I mean, I'd want to test that. I mean, this is why I wanted some actual factual evidence to find out, because we're just taking this guy's word for it that there's water vapor and alcohol vapor in there. I'm not sure why there'd be water vapor, because obviously alcohol vapor and water vapor are very different and happen at different sort of temperatures and all the rest of it, as we know, because of the distillation process. So is that true? I don't know. But it's an interesting one. It's an interesting theory that I hadn't seen before, or hypothesis maybe. So essentially, the experts, and all I can read online is people saying don't do it. So don't store your bottles like that, obviously, with a constant high ABV liquid on a cork. It will degrade. It will dry out. And don't wet your corks either, because, well, it's okay. It's not a constant contact, but you're still doing it. And it kind of makes sense to me, because when you put alcohol on your skin, it dries it out. So anybody that kind of works with rubbing alcohol or any of that kind of stuff, or if you've got something in alcohol in it and you put it on your hands, you will notice it dry out, because I think it gets into the oils and breaks them down, I think, in your skin, and maybe even once it attaches to water molecules, maybe that's where, when it evaporates, it takes some of that water molecules with it. So for me, I definitely think a higher ABV, especially, the sort of 60 or the 55% and up kind of whiskies, most definitely do not wet those corks. So it's interesting that this argument still kind of rages on, whether people should and shouldn't. I think the general consensus is that you shouldn't, but obviously you still get people that know quite a bit about whiskey, like Stuart, who do it. It'd be interesting to find out how many. We don't really, you won't know until the future, but it'd be interesting to know how many corks might fail from somebody like Stuart's collection later on versus somebody like mine who don't do it. But then obviously we're buying different things from different people who might have stored it in a different way, who may have also wet the corks or not wet the corks. So it's very difficult to get that kind of data, isn't it? To look at it historically and go, right, that's kind of what happened. And obviously corks might degrade for sort of different reasons as well. I've seen ones that have kind of gone mouldy. My Killoman Macker Bay one just went like a really horrible kind of mouldy, awful colour and started to break apart. So I think there's a few different things that can happen with corks. Obviously the glue and whatnot can fail and they can just come away from the top. But in terms of degradation, I think the two main ones are just drying up and crumbling away and going rotten. What to do if your cork does fail? My advice would be to use a rubber cork, because the rubber corks don't seem to degrade at all. From my reading, I think this could be another video, but from my reading, the full corks, like all corks, obviously can suffer degradation, but there's also an argument about these composite corks, which are part cork, part synthetic, and there's people saying they're the worst, they're the ones that degrade the most. Then you've got big vodka manufacturers saying that that's what they ship theirs with because they've done a bunch of research on it and these composite corks are the best. So it's difficult to know who to believe until there's proper scientific kind of tests and stuff that comes out of it. A lot of it just comes with experience. So if an old whiskey collector says the composite corks are the worst, I'm kind of inclined to believe that because that's where the experience is. Whereas some guy who's just making vodka and shipping it about just saying, yeah, we've invested a ton of money into composite corks and they're the best. Yeah, I don't know. Well, you could just be talking marketing stuff. I don't know. It does seem though that maybe whiskey producers should look into this a bit more, because more and more whiskey is being collected, it's being stored, It's not being drunk for many, many years, decades, maybe 100 years. So, you know, maybe that might be a selling point for some collectors in terms of, you know, steering people away from like actual cork now and moving to a sort of more synthetic based thing like rubber. But then also, you know, a sort of rubber or a plastic can degrade as well. People are always worried about that leaching into spirits or your food, whatever. So nothing seems like a very good kind of alternative, does it? I guess it's just the luck of the draw when it comes to cork. Well guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up there, finish my coffee, but tell me in the comments below whether you think it's a yes or a no for wetting corks. Do you do it? Tell me why. After having seen this video, are you going to stop doing it? Tell me why. Interested to know who does it, who doesn't, the reasons behind it, as usual. Comments below. I'll put a link to Stuart's video in the description. Head over there, tell him to stop doing it. Stop it, Stuart. Stop it now.